you to hear from this text, number one, why is it so important that we maintain the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace? Why is that important? Secondly, I want you to see in this passage some very basic, what I call gospel virtues that are important for us to cultivate in our lives if we're going to maintain the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And then thirdly, I want you to see in this passage, where are we going to get the enabling power to do that? So those are the three things we're going to talk about. First of all, let me read the passage again, just verses 1 through 6. Paul says this. This is on the heels of Ephesians 1, 2, and 3. He is landing, if you will, this big jet airliner on the tarmac and saying, if you want to know how to live out the gospel, let me tell you how. And he says this, as a prisoner for the Lord then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. That's all the stuff he's talked about in chapters 1, 2, and 3. All these great themes and realities of the gospel. I want that to work itself out in your daily life. Live a life worthy of the calling you've received. And then he says this, be completely humble and gentle, patient, bearing with one another in love. And then here's the command, make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And then we won't talk about it this morning, but he then goes on to talk about how we are also a diverse group. We have different gifts and abilities, and that diversity is actually to strengthen unity, not to break it down. But that's not our focus this morning, but it is an important thing to consider as you think about unity. Unity also involves diversity. We're all different, and those differences should be strengths as we come together and work together. But why is it so important for us to maintain the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace? And Paul gives us an indication of why it's so important in a few other verses that we didn't read. For instance, in verse 12, he says, I want you to do this so that you might be built up. I want you to do this so you can be built up. Verse 13, I want you to live together in unity in the midst of your diversity so that, verse 13, you may reach maturity. So that you won't continue to be immature, but you will mature. In verse 15, he says, so that you might grow up. And then verse 16, so that you might be built up. So Paul is giving us a window into why our relationships and fighting for, if you will, the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace, the reason it's so important is because what's at stake here is this is what I was thinking. This is a great